In the last few years, more than 20 states, including New York, have passed new laws restricting how people can buy and carry guns. But we're seeing data that indicates there's a thriving underground market for guns. Can you talk about your 2022 Interstate Task Force to stop the illegal trafficking of guns?
When I took office 3 years ago, we were in the throes of a major crime wave, nationwide, not just New York. It was a nationwide phenomenon. And my husband was the United States Attorney for Barack Obama, and I saw how collaboration can help and eradicate crime. And I thought, why don't we harness the power of not just New York State, but all of our neighbors? Because 80% of the guns in New York come from out of state. We don't manufacture them. So there is a pipeline that's bringing these guns right to the streets of New York, and we have to stop that. So I reached out to other governors. We had 9 at first. We now have 12 states that are all contiguous. And if we're sharing data, identifying perpetrators, stopping them at the border, we can stop the flow of illegal guns from coming into our state. And the numbers have been incredibly successful. The number of gun interdictions, about 9,500. We've taken 10,000 guns off the streets. I mean, these are numbers that were just escalating year after year until someone finally says, we're going to work together. I'll put the resources behind it. We have spent over $800 million directly on gun interdiction measures, another $1 billion to help support our local communities for the gun violence disruptor program. So combined, almost $2 billion in 3 years to say no more slaughter in my state.
Mm-hmm. Following our conversation here, I'm going to dive in with our panelists on community-based solutions and approaches that they're doing on the ground throughout the country. We know that these solutions from the communities themselves are promising toward reducing gun-related injuries and killings. In a similar vein, from your perch, what do you see as promising solutions and approaches to the issue?
It does absolutely come down to engaging the community. They're the ones who are victimized. They're the ones who often see perpetrators. They're the ones who have evidence that can come forward. But also, how do we change the hearts and minds of particularly young men, young kids in these neighborhoods who think that the only alternative they have is to be part of a gang because they're not getting the love and nurture they need at home. This becomes their family. And that is what's so tragic about this. But what you can do with these violence disruptor programs, and we've funded so many of them all across the state, is that oftentimes these might be former gang members. These are people who've been involved with the law. And so they're the ones who have the story to say, don't make the same mistake I did. And if we fund them and increase the number of them in every community, they are making a real difference. So I'm going to continue focusing on not just the law enforcement side, which has been quite extraordinary, and we've had to change our laws. And back to changing our laws, the Supreme Court of the United States struck down a law that we had on the books for over 100 years, a concealed carry law that says you should not be able to walk into this venue right now with a gun in your pocket, go on our subways, walk around Times Square. And the Supreme Court took that power away from me as the governor of New York to protect my citizens. And I said the next day, we're fighting back. We're going to structure a different law. We'll go right up to the line to where we can go. And now we've identified sensitive locations, which is a large part of New York, where you cannot carry a gun, including Times Square and houses of worship and other places. So I had to come around and do an end run, basically, around what the Supreme Court was trying to do and taking away my rights. So the violence disruptor programs, the massive funding into law enforcement, the community policing, the interdiction at the borders with our consortium is making a difference to a point where our murders are down almost to the 1960s levels, which is extraordinary. And one year we had, 1990, we had 2,600 murders in the state of New York. We're trending to be about 350 this year. I mean, look at the difference in that. It's gone, shootings are down 47% since I became governor because we had an intentional strategy that said, we're not going to lose any more lives senselessly to guns. And again, the laws are so important. The laws that we have on the books, the red flag laws. We had about 1,300 extreme risk orders of protection. When you identify someone who shows a propensity to do harm to themselves or to others, someone sees that red flag, a school counselor, a family member, law enforcement, a principal, a teacher, someone's seeing this behavior, someone's watching it, and they don't think they have the power to do something about it, but we said you do have the power. And by changing the law to say you are required to notify the authorities so they can identify whether they have access to a gun, we have had a 1,300% increase in the number of extreme risk orders protections where other states aren't doing anything. And this should be a national policy. This should be a national policy passed by Congress because we have taken guns out of the hands that we know from people that could do harm to others before there's a tragedy that happens. This is what smart policies are all about, getting there before you have to go to another funeral of a child. And that's what I want to continue doing here in New York, and I hope other states will follow suit.
The Supreme Court stands poised to knock down any legislation, attempts to legislate the gun violence epidemic. You mentioned going right up to the line. What is that line? What can you do? What can't you do?
We weren't allowed to ban concealed carry weapons, but I put in place more restrictions on who can apply for them. Okay? We are able to look at your social media. That's where people are telegraphing what they're going to do. That was our Buffalo killer. It was all out there on social media. It's often out there. People are telegraphing what they're going to do. And if you can't be aware of that, you can't see what's out there about them, then you're not protecting yourself or society. My #1 job as governor of the state of New York is to protect our citizens, full stop. And this is part of that strategy. So we have more requirements on background checks. Our background checks are very strong. But even if someone is able to secure a concealed weapon permit, and many of them are legitimate. There's people in security, and there are legitimate purposes that I will agree with. But it's time, place, and manner. And again, I don't want them on the streets of New York. I don't think I don't think it should be in a schoolyard. That's not appropriate. A playground. So many places they don't make sense. So we went right when they said, I can't ban them, I said, but they threw some words about sensitive places, and I defined sensitive places in New York, and our law is holding.
Wonderful.
So far.
Wonderful. You mentioned violence diversion programs. What's entailed in these programs?
We fund an enormous number of these. We know the neighborhoods where they need them. These are individuals who, community-based organizations. SNUG is one of them. It's just guns spelled backwards. It's one I was familiar with in Buffalo, New York. Like I said, I have a family member in law enforcement, a prosecutor, and I saw the power of these organizations when they got together. I did a lot of events with them. We announced a lot of funding for them all over the state. And what they do is they develop relationships. They intervene because if the young person has a strong role model at home, both parents, one parent, grandparents, someone that's taking care of them and watching them and knows where they are after school and keep an eye on them, there's not likely to be a problem. But that's not the reality for so many families in so many of our communities. The parents have to work. The mom has to work. And there's no one there after school. And this is where the temptation is great to find alternatives. These members, like I said, many of them have done time themselves. They can speak truth to what they saw. They're credible messengers that are the only ones who can break through and make a difference. And they've been successful, and I'll keep supporting them over and over and over again as part of a holistic strategy. But another part of that strategy deals with mental health. We have seen the radicalization of people on social media, but also our teenagers many of them are despairing. And I've seen this because I've convened countless roundtables with teenagers over the last year as I look at social media, the effect it has on how their well-being, how they feel about themselves, and also cell phones in schools. I mean, this is an issue I'm looking intensely at because kids are spiraling. They're not paying attention in class. They're being bullied all day long. They don't have a break from it. And one young woman said to me at one of our forums, you have to save us from ourselves. You have to help us. You have to stand up and say, we shouldn't be doing this because we can't do it alone. So that's only tangentially related to gun violence, but it also goes to the psychology of people. And if we're not helping children and teenagers be healthy now, what are we supposed to expect from them when they turn to adults? We're supposed to not just raise children, but raise adults who are healthy and fully functioning and have human connections that they're being denied right now, the way this device has taken over their lives.
I have to wrap up here, but one more question. If there's one key message that you'd like the audience here to walk away with, what would it be? We
have seen in New York State that leadership that is committed to ensuring that you look at all the levers that are at our disposal, the platforms we have, the ability to change law. There are ways that we can stop gun violence in this country. We can be like the other countries who are gathering in our city right now that don't know a fraction of the shootings we have. It's the accessibility to guns. I continue to call on Congress to do the right thing and reinstate the ban on assault weapons that was so effective for an entire decade until it was repealed. That's number one. Call on other states to do as we've done with the red flag law. Just pass what we did here in New York, and you could have prevented so many of the mass shootings. As every time you look at and analyze the social media and the footprint that's out there for these shooters, it's always telegraphed in advance. You can, and there's always someone who says, "Yeah, I kind of thought that kid was." Something wrong was there. The evidence is there. We have to give people the responsibility to report it to law enforcement, let them get the order of protection, and let's start protecting people. That's what this is all about. So I would say, don't give up hope. I mean, the situation is dire. It is spiraling. One more mass shooting on the news is just making us sick, and it's taking us to a dark place. But it does not have to be that way. I reject the notion that this has to be our destiny. There are policies out there that are working. Otherwise, how do we cut shootings down 47%? This is all since I've been governor in just a few years. Look at the impact that we have had here in the state of New York. I want every state to be just like that. And then we start reclaiming our kids and our safety and the mental health that we need to know that we are safe in our country.
Governor Hochul, thank you so much for being here.